My name is June Adler, and I'm 32 years old. The night I ducked into a cafe to escape a storm, I thought the worst part of my day was covering a coworker's shift and getting caught in terrible weather. I ordered tea, shook off the rain, and that's when I heard it, my husband's laugh coming from a corner booth. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. When I turned to look, what I saw sitting across from him made my heart stop. Sometimes the storms outside are nothing compared to the ones waiting for you in the places you least expect. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment and let me know where you're from. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. I should have been home hours ago. The rain came down in sheets so thick, I could barely see 3 feet past my windshield. The wipers worked frantically, squeaking against the glass in a rhythm that matched my exhaustion. I'd stayed late at the office, covering Sharon's shift because she needed to be home with her husband. Something about an anniversary dinner she couldn't miss. I'd smiled and told her it was fine, that I understood. Now, hunched over my steering wheel, squinting through the downpour, I wondered if anyone would cover for me if I needed them. The storm had rolled in fast, the kind that catches you off guard even when the forecast warned you it was coming. I'd ignored the alerts on my phone, too focused on finishing spreadsheets and answering emails that could have waited until morning. That's how I ended up on the east side of town, far from our house in the suburbs, caught in weather that made driving feel dangerous. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up with my husband's name, David. I reached for it, but my fingers were clumsy from gripping the wheel too tight. By the time I glanced down, the call had already ended. No voicemail, notification followed. I told myself he was probably just checking in, maybe wondering when I'd be home. Or maybe he was driving too and had called without thinking. I didn't call back. The rain demanded too much attention. Traffic slowed to a crawl. Brake lights glowed red through the downpour, blurry and distant. I considered pulling over, waiting it out, but the thought of sitting alone in my car in some parking lot felt worse than pushing forward. At least moving gave me the illusion of progress. Then I saw it, a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. Warm light spilled from its fogged windows, cutting through the gray storm like a beacon. I recognized it immediately, even through the rain. It was the same cafe David and I had stumbled into years ago, back when we first moved to the city. We'd been caught in a summer storm that time, laughing as we ran inside, soaked to the skin. He'd ordered us both coffee we didn't need, and we'd sat by the window watching the rain and talking about everything and nothing. I hadn't thought about that day in years. The memory tugged at something soft inside me, something I'd forgotten was there. Without really deciding, I flicked on my turn signal and pulled into the small parking lot. The cafe looked just as I remembered, modest, unassuming, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you needed it. I needed it now. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the smell of coffee and something sweet baking in the back. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, mixing with the low hum of conversation. The cafe wasn't crowded, just a handful of people scattered at small tables, most of them alone with laptops or books. The windows were fogged over completely, blocking out the storm. It felt like stepping into a different world. I shook the rain from my coat and wiped my face with the back of my hand. My hair was damp, my shoes squeaked against the tile floor. I probably looked like a mess, but no one seemed to notice. At the counter, a young woman with kind eyes smiled at me. "Rough night out there," she said. "You have no idea," I replied, managing a tired smile. I ordered tea instead of coffee, something calming, something that wouldn't keep me wired for the drive home. While I waited, I scanned the room for an empty seat. Most of the tables were taken, but there were a few spots near the back. That's when I heard it. A laugh. Low and familiar, the kind that carries across a room without trying. I knew that laugh better than my own. I'd heard it 1,000 times, across dinner tables, in movie theaters, in our living room late at night, when something on TV struck him as funny. My heart stuttered. I told myself I was imagining it, exhaustion playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, and this time my body reacted before my mind caught up. I turned toward the sound, scanning the cafe more carefully now. And there he was, David, my husband, sitting in a corner booth near the back, partially hidden by the angle of the room. He looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. His shoulders weren't tense. His jaw wasn't clenched. He wasn't checking his phone or staring off into the middle distance like he did at home. He looked free, unburdened. For a split second, I felt relieved. There he is, I thought. The man I married. The one who used to laugh like that all the time. Then I noticed the woman. She was young. Younger than me by at least 5 years, maybe more. Dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder. She was sitting close to him. Not across from him the way friends sit. Not beside him the way coworkers might. She was on his lap. Not sitting upright, awkwardly perched the way someone might sit as a joke. No. She was curled into him, her legs folded sideways, her body tucked against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she belonged there. His arm was around her waist. The world tilted. Sound drained from the cafe. The jazz, the conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine. All of it faded into a muffled hum. My vision tunneled. I could see only them, framed in that corner booth like a photograph I was never supposed to see. I expected anger to hit me first. Or pain. But what came instead was disbelief. A strange, detached confusion, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart instead of my own. This isn't real, I thought. This is a mistake. A misunderstanding. But my hands were shaking. I considered turning around, walking out quietly, pretending I'd never come inside, never seen them. I could go home, crawl into bed, and convince myself it hadn't happened. We could keep living the life we'd built, the one where I didn't ask too many questions and he didn't offer too many answers. But my feet wouldn't move. I stood there, frozen, holding a cup of tea I didn't remember taking from the counter. The heat from the cup seeped through the cardboard sleeve, burning my palms, but I couldn't let go. Then he looked up. Our eyes met across the cafe. For one terrible, endless moment, neither of us moved. His face drained of color. The easy smile he'd been wearing, the one I hadn't seen in so long, vanished instantly, replaced by something raw and terrified. He knew I'd seen everything, and I knew there was no going back. The woman noticed his reaction before she turned. She tilted her head slightly, following his gaze, curiosity flickering across her face. When her eyes landed on me, she didn't flinch, didn't pull away from him. She just studied me, calm and detached, like I was an interruption she hadn't expected but wasn't particularly concerned about. Then she spoke. "Babe, who is that?" Babe. The word landed harder than a slap. It echoed in my head, distorting everything around it. I felt my chest tighten, my breath catch somewhere between my lungs and my throat. David opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I'd never seen him speechless before. David always had words. Explanations. Justifications. He could talk his way out of anything. A missed anniversary, a forgotten promise, a lie I'd caught him in but let slide because it seemed easier than fighting. But now, sitting there with another woman on his lap, he had nothing. I started walking toward them. I didn't decide to move. My body just did it, one foot in front of the other, slow and deliberate. The cafe wasn't large, but the distance between us felt infinite. Every step echoed in my head, loud and final. Other patrons started to notice. I could feel their eyes shifting toward us, conversations trailing off mid-sentence. The barista paused while steaming milk. Even the jazz seemed to quiet, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The woman finally shifted off David's lap. Not quickly, not in a panic. She moved with the kind of annoyed grace someone uses when they're inconvenienced, but trying to appear unbothered. She settled into the booth beside him, smoothing her sweater, tucking her hair behind her ear. Her eyes stayed on me, watching. I stopped at the edge of their table. For a moment, I just stood there, looking down at them. David's face was pale, his hands flat on the table like he was bracing himself. The woman leaned back against the booth, arms crossed loosely, waiting. I set my tea down on their table. The cup made a soft thud against the wood. "Hi," I said. My voice came out calm. "Steady." almost polite. I'm June. June Adler, David's wife. The word wife hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The woman's expression shifted, not quite shock, but something close. A flicker of calculation crossed her face, quick and subtle, before she smoothed it away. She let out a short, breathy laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, she said, glancing at David. You didn't mention you were married. I looked at David, waiting. He stared at the table, jaw tight, avoiding my gaze. David, I said quietly. He finally looked up. June, this isn't. He stopped, swallowed hard. Can we talk? Somewhere private. He reached for my arm, his voice dropping to a whisper. Please. Just let me explain. I pulled my arm back, not harshly, just out of reach. Instead of responding, I did something that surprised even me. I sat down. Right there, across from them, sliding into the booth like I was joining friends for coffee. I folded my hands on the table, looked at them both, and waited. David's eyes widened. June, what are you? I'm sitting, I said simply. You two looked comfortable. I didn't want to interrupt. The woman shifted uncomfortably now, her confidence cracking just slightly. She glanced at David, then back at me, clearly unsure how to navigate this. The cafe had gone almost completely silent. I could feel everyone watching, pretending not to watch. The storm outside roared louder, rain hammering against the windows, but inside it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. David leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. June, please. Not here. Let's go outside and talk. I'm fine here, I said. The woman shifted again, uncrossing her arms, placing her hands flat on the table like she was preparing to stand. But she didn't. Something kept her there, maybe curiosity, maybe pride. Maybe she wanted to see how this would play out. I looked at her directly for the first time since sitting down. How long have you two known each other? I asked. My tone was conversational, almost friendly. She blinked, caught off guard. She glanced at David, who looked like he wanted to disappear. A few months, she said finally. How did you meet? Through work, she said a little too quickly. Just casual. Lunch meetings. Nothing serious. Lunch meetings, I repeated slowly, nodding. That's nice. David loves a good lunch meeting. David's hands clenched into fists on the table. June, stop. This isn't fair. Fair. The word came out sharper than I intended. I took a breath, forcing my voice back to calm. You're right. This isn't fair. The woman spoke again, her confidence returning slightly, like she thought she'd found her footing. Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but I saw you sitting on my husband's lap, I said evenly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't have an answer for that. I turned my attention back to David. Late meetings, I said. Business trips. All those evenings you said you were working late. I paused, watching his face. How many of those were with her? June. How many, David? He didn't answer. He just looked at me, his expression somewhere between guilt and frustration, like he resented being cornered. The woman let something slip then, almost without realizing it. He said you two barely talked anymore, that you were living separate lives. I felt the words hit me, sharp and precise. Not because they weren't true, but because they were. At least partially. Did he? I said softly, looking at her. What else did he say? She hesitated, suddenly aware she'd said too much. I just meant. No, please, I said, my voice still calm.
I'm genuinely curious.
What else did my husband tell you about our marriage? David stood abruptly, the movement jarring in the tense stillness. That's enough. June, we're leaving.
Now.
I didn't move. I just looked up at him, and for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen before.
Fear.
Not fear of losing me. Not fear of hurting me. Fear of being exposed. I stood slowly, deliberately, keeping my eyes on him. The woman stayed seated, watching us both with wide eyes, her earlier confidence gone completely. Thank you, I said quietly, looking at her. I needed to see this. Then I turned and walked toward the door. I made it 3 steps before David caught up to me. June, wait. His hand closed around my arm. Not rough, but desperate. I stopped, not because he asked me to, but because I wanted to hear what he'd say. What excuse he'd crafted in the 10 seconds it took me to cross the cafe. Please, he said, his voice low and urgent. Just listen to me. I turned to face him. Behind him, I could see the woman still sitting in the booth, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. The other patrons had given up pretending not to stare. The barista had abandoned her post entirely, standing frozen with a dish rag in her hands. I'm listening, I said. David glanced around, suddenly aware of the audience. Not here. Let's go outside. Or to the car. Somewhere we can actually talk. We can talk right here. June. Say what you need to say, David. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was stalling, buying time to construct the right version of events. I'd seen him do it before, on phone calls with clients, during arguments with his brother, anytime he needed to shape a narrative in his favor. It's not what you think, he said finally. I almost laughed. You're going to have to be more specific. Because what I think is that I just walked into a cafe and found my husband with another woman on his lap. So, unless I'm dramatically misunderstanding the definition of an affair. It's not an affair, he said quickly.
Too quickly.
Then what is it? He opened his mouth.
Closed it.
Opened it again. It's complicated. Complicated. I repeated flatly.
Yes.
It's June, I know how it looks, but how long?
What?
How long has this been going on? He hesitated just a fraction too long. It's not like that. We're friends. That's all. It got a little blurred tonight, but friends don't sit on each other's laps, David. She was upset, he said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. She's going through something difficult, and I was just being there for her. That's what friends do. I stared at him, waiting for more, for something that might make sense. But he just stood there, his jaw set, his eyes pleading with me to accept this paper-thin explanation. You're lying, I said simply. I'm not. You're lying to me right now in front of all these people, and you can't even do it well. His expression shifted, anger flashing across his face before he suppressed it. You're making a scene? I'm making a scene? The words came out louder than I intended, echoing through the cafe. I walked into a cafe to escape a storm, and I found my husband with another woman. But sure, David, I'm the problem here. Keep your voice down.
No.
He blinked, thrown off. I'd never refused him like that before. Not outright, not without softening it with an apology or an explanation. I took a step back, putting space between us. I asked you how long. You didn't answer. Because there's nothing to. She knew something about our house, I said, cutting him off. When she was talking, she mentioned something. I paused, the detail clicking into place now that my mind was clearing. She said you barely talked anymore, that you were living separate lives. How would she know that unless you told her? And why would you tell her that unless you were trying to justify something? David's face went carefully blank. That mask he wore when he was backed into a corner. You're reading too much into. Did you tell her why you can't leave me? The question landed like a stone in still water. His expression flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. What are you talking about? He said, but his voice had lost its edge. You heard me. He looked past me toward the booth, and I followed his gaze. The woman was still there, but she wasn't sitting comfortably anymore. She was leaning forward, her arms wrapped around herself, her face drawn. She was listening. She'd heard my question. And from the look on her face, I realized something that made my stomach turn. She'd asked him the same thing. I turned back to David. She doesn't know, does she? Whatever you promised her, whatever you told her about us, about your future together, it was a lie. June, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. My voice was quieter now, but harder. Explain why your friend knows about our marriage. Explain why she looks so comfortable with you. Explain why you didn't answer your phone earlier tonight. He went still. What? You called me, right before I came in here. But you didn't leave a message. I was checking in. You were checking to see where I was. I said, the realization settling cold and heavy in my chest. You wanted to make sure I wasn't nearby. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, caught. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't recognize the man in front of me. This wasn't the person I'd built a life with. This was someone who'd learned to hide things. Someone who'd gotten good at it. This isn't just tonight, is it? I said softly. June. This isn't new. This has been happening for a while. The late nights. The business trips. The way you've been distant. I thought. I stopped, swallowing the words. I thought it was work. I thought it was stress. It was, he insisted, but his voice was weak. No, I said. It was her. Behind me, I heard movement, the woman standing, footsteps approaching. She stopped beside David, her arms still wrapped around herself, her face pale. I think I should go, she said quietly. I looked at her and for a moment, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not even jealousy, just a strange, sad kind of recognition. She was just as lost in this as I was. Maybe more. Did he tell you he loved you? I asked her. She didn't answer, but her eyes filled with tears. Did he tell you he was going to leave me? That it was just a matter of time? Stop it, David said, his voice sharp now. Stop trying to manipulate. I'm not manipulating anyone, I said, still looking at her. I'm asking her a question. Because I think we both deserve to know the truth. The woman's voice came out small and broken. He said things were complicated. That he needed time. Time, I repeated. For what? She looked at David, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. I turned back to him. What were you waiting for, David? What were you trying to figure out? He said nothing. And, in that silence, I understood. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. This wasn't a mistake that spiraled out of control. This was calculated.
Planned.
He was waiting for something, some piece to fall into place, some moment when leaving wouldn't cost him too much. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing something else. Thank you, I said again, this time to both of them. I needed to see this. I walked past them, through the cafe, past the staring faces and the whispered conversations. The barista opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but I didn't stop. I pushed through the door and back into the storm. The rain hit me like a wall, cold and relentless, but I barely felt it. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice before I managed to unlock the car door. I was halfway into the driver's seat when I heard him calling my name. June. June, wait. I didn't turn around. I pulled the door closed and jammed the key into the ignition. But he was faster than I expected. He appeared at my window, knocking on the glass, his hair already soaked, water streaming down his face. Please, he shouted over the storm. Just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain. I sat there, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel. Every instinct told me to drive away, to leave him standing there in the rain. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the 10 years we'd spent together. Maybe it was the memory of who we used to be. Or maybe I just needed to hear what he'd say when he didn't have an audience. I lowered the window an inch. Explain what? I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. Everything, he said desperately. Just, can I get in? Please? We can talk properly. I can make you understand. Understand what? That you've been cheating on me. It's not. He stopped himself, seemed to recalibrate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I messed up. I know I did. But it's not what you think. She doesn't mean anything to me. I swear. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. She doesn't mean anything. I repeated, my voice hollow. Does she know that? I don't care what he caught himself again, running a hand over his wet face. I care about you. About us. About saving our marriage. Our marriage. I let out a sound that might have been a laugh. When did you start caring about that? I've always cared. Don't. The word came out sharp. Don't you dare lie to me right now. He pressed his palms against the window, leaning closer. I'm not lying. June, I love you. I know I haven't shown it well, I know I've been distant, but did you ever plan to tell me? The question stopped him cold. What? About her? About whatever this is. Did you ever plan to tell me? Or were you just going to keep doing this until… I stopped, the rest of the sentence catching in my throat. Until what, David? Until she got tired of waiting? Until I found out on my own? Until you figured out which one of us was the better option? It's not like that. Then what is it like? He opened his mouth, but no explanation came. Just the same helpless, trapped expression he'd worn in the cafe. And that's when I understood. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of being exposed. Afraid of what would happen when people found out. Afraid of how it would look, what it would cost him. Not emotionally. Practically. You're not sorry you did this, I said quietly, the realization settling over me with a strange calm. You're sorry I found out. That's not true. Get away from my car, David. June, please.
Get away from my car.
He stared at me through the rain-streaked window, and for a moment, I thought he might refuse. Might stand there arguing until I had no choice but to listen. But then he stepped back. I rolled up the window, put the car in reverse, and pulled out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, soaked and alone, watching me drive away. I didn't cry. I thought I would. Thought the tears would come the moment I was alone. But they didn't. I just drove, gripping the wheel, staring at the road, feeling nothing but a strange, hollow emptiness. The storm was already starting to ease. The rain lightened to a steady drizzle, and visibility improved. I could see the road clearly now, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I drove on autopilot, not really paying attention to where I was going, just moving forward because stopping felt impossible. Then I remembered something. A detail from months ago. Small at the time, easy to dismiss. David had asked me to sign some papers, something about refinancing the house, updating our insurance. He'd handed me a stack of documents, pointed to the signature lines, and I'd signed without reading them carefully. I trusted him. He handled our finances. That was our arrangement. But now, sitting in my car, hands trembling on the wheel, I wondered what I'd actually signed. I pulled over into an empty parking lot and grabbed my phone. My hands were still shaking, and it took me 3 tries to unlock the screen. I scrolled through my emails, searching for anything David might have sent me. Financial documents. Legal papers. Anything. There, an email from 6 months ago, forwarded to me by accident, he'd said. I'd barely glanced at it at the time, just some attachment with a bunch of legal jargon. I'd saved it, meaning to ask him about it later, but I never did. I opened it now. The document was dense, filled with terms I didn't fully understand. But certain phrases jumped out at me. Beneficiary designation. Asset transfer. Joint account restructuring. My stomach dropped. I kept scrolling through my emails, looking for more. And I found them. Little breadcrumbs I'd ignored because I trusted him. Because I thought we were partners. There were messages with timestamps that didn't line up with things he'd told me. Calendar invitations for meetings that didn't match with deposits in our account. Small inconsistencies that I dismissed as oversights. But now they formed a pattern. A pattern of someone carefully, methodically, preparing for something. I opened our shared calendar, the one we used to coordinate our lives. David's schedule was meticulously maintained, color-coded, detailed, every appointment and meeting logged. I started cross-referencing, comparing his calendar to our bank statements, to the emails I'd found. And that's when I saw it. Meetings that had no corresponding income. Time blocked out for work that didn't align with any projects he'd mentioned. Gaps that made no sense unless he was doing something he didn't want me to know about. Or unless he was with someone he didn't want me to know about. I sat there in my car, rain pattering softly against the roof, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not grief.
Clarity.
This betrayal was deeper than I'd realized. It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just physical. It was calculated. And if David had been this careful about hiding her, if he'd been this strategic about managing his time, his money, his story, then what else had he been planning? What else didn't I know? I started the car again and drove home with a new resolve. Not to confront him, not to forgive him, but to understand everything. Before I made my move, the house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. David's car wasn't there yet.
Good.
I needed time. I went inside, shaking off the last of the rain, and headed straight for his office. The door was usually closed but not locked. He'd never had a reason to lock it before. I'd never given him a reason not to trust me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I turned on the desk lamp and started searching. Methodically.
Carefully.
I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I'd recognize it when I found it. His desk was organized almost obsessively so. Pens in a holder. Papers stacked neatly in trays. His laptop closed and centered on the desk mat. I tried opening the laptop. Password protected. The password we'd always shared didn't work anymore. He'd changed it.
When?
I moved to the filing cabinet. Pulled open the top drawer. Bills, receipts, tax documents, all organized by date. Nothing unusual. Second drawer. Insurance papers, mortgage documents, investment statements. I pulled them out, scanning each one, looking for anything that seemed off. And then I found it. A bank statement for an account I didn't recognize.
Not our joint account.
Not his personal checking. Something else entirely. I sat down in his chair, my hands shaking again as I read through the transactions. Regular deposits. Not huge amounts, but consistent. And withdrawals, some to pay for things I recognized, others to places and services I didn't. My heart pounded as I kept searching. There were more documents, tucked into a folder at the back of the drawer. Legal papers. Some with my signature. The ones I'd signed without reading carefully. Others without. I felt sick. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the engine cutting off, the door slamming. I quickly put everything back, trying to make it look undisturbed, and hurried out of his office. By the time he walked through the front door, I was in the kitchen, standing at the counter, staring at nothing. "June," he said softly. I didn't turn around. "Can we talk? Please." "Not tonight," I said, my voice flat. "June." I said not tonight, David. I heard him hesitate, then the sound of his footsteps heading upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, listening to the house settle around me, and realized something that chilled me to the bone. The woman in the cafe wasn't just an affair. She was part of something bigger. Something I was only beginning to understand. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to David's breathing in the room down the hall. He'd retreated to the guest room without argument, and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through everything I'd found. The bank account, the legal documents, the passwords that had been changed, the calendar entries that didn't align with reality. When dawn finally broke, pale light filtering through the curtains, I got up and went back to his office. I needed to be systematic about this. Careful. If David had been hiding things for months, maybe longer, then I needed to understand the full scope before I did anything. I started with the filing cabinet again, this time pulling out every document and photographing it with my phone. Bank statements, investment papers, insurance policies. I didn't know what half of it meant, but I could learn. I could figure it out. In the bottom drawer, tucked behind a stack of old tax returns, I found a folder I'd missed the night before. Inside were copies of emails printed out, which seemed strange in itself. Who prints emails anymore unless they're trying to keep them separate from a digital trail? I skimmed through them quickly, my heart rate picking up with each page. They were between David and someone named Marcus. The emails were vague, carefully worded, but the subtext was clear. They were discussing assets, timing, restructuring that needed to happen before certain changes took effect. One email made my blood run cold. Make sure everything's transferred before she notices. The window is narrower than we thought.
She. Me.
I took photos of everything and put it all back exactly as I'd found it. In our shared home office, the one we both used, I found more clues. David had reorganized a drawer recently. I could tell because items that used to be on the left were now on the right. Small things. A stapler. Sticky notes. But also a flash drive that I didn't recognize. I plugged it into my laptop. Password protected. Of course. I tried our anniversary. Our birthdays. Nothing worked. I'd have to find another way to access it, but just knowing it existed told me something important. David was keeping secrets in our own home, right under my nose. I checked our shared calendar again, this time going back months. I started making notes. Every meeting, every blocked time, every work event he'd attended. Then I cross-referenced it with our bank statements and credit card bills. The pattern became clearer. There were expenses that didn't match his calendar. Dinners at restaurants he'd never mentioned. Hotel charges in the city when he'd supposedly been at the office. Gas station purchases in neighborhoods we never visited. And then I noticed something else. Our joint savings account, the one we'd been building together for years, had been steadily decreasing. Not dramatically. Just small transfers, a few $100s at a time, spread out over months. Easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. I pulled up the transaction history and traced where the money had gone. Into that account I'd found the statement for. The one that was only in David's name. He'd been siphoning our money. Our money. The savings we'd built together, that I'd contributed to every month from my salary, that we talked about using for a down payment on a bigger house someday. He'd been moving it piece by piece into an account I didn't have access to. I sat back in the chair, my hands trembling with rage I couldn't quite express. This wasn't just an affair. This was theft. Betrayal on multiple levels. I forced myself to keep going, to stay focused. I called my bank and asked about the joint savings account. The representative confirmed what I already knew. There had been multiple transfers over the past 8 months, all authorized by David, who had equal access to the account. Can you tell me if there are any scheduled future transfers? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Let me check. A pause. Yes, actually. There's a large transfer scheduled for next month, December 15th. It looks like it's set to move nearly everything remaining in the account. My birthday. He'd scheduled it for my birthday. I thanked the representative and hung up, feeling sick. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full picture. So, I did something I'd never done before. I reached out to someone who might have seen David with her before. My friend Rachel worked downtown, in the same area where David's office was located. We'd been close in college, but life had pulled us in different directions. We still texted occasionally, sent birthday wishes, but we hadn't really talked in months. I kept it casual. Asked if she wanted to grab lunch. Said I was in the neighborhood and thought it would be nice to catch up. She agreed immediately. We met at a small bistro near her office. Rachel looked the same, warm smile, easy laugh, the kind of person who made you feel comfortable immediately. It's so good to see you, she said, hugging me. It's been way too long. We ordered, made small talk about work and life. I waited until we'd been there for a while, until the conversation felt natural and relaxed, before I brought it up. Random question, I said, trying to sound casual. Have you ever seen David around here? I know his office isn't far from yours. Oh, yeah, actually, Rachel said, nodding. I've run into him a few times, usually at that coffee place on 5th Street. My heart started pounding, but I kept my expression neutral. Really? He never mentioned seeing you. Well, he's usually pretty focused when I see him. You know David. Always in work mode. Was he alone? I asked, then quickly added, I just mean I know he has lunch meetings sometimes. Clients and stuff. Rachel hesitated, and I saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty. Maybe discomfort. Actually, she said slowly, the last couple times I saw him, he was with someone. A woman. I figured it was a coworker or something. What did she look like? Rachel's expression shifted. She was picking up on something in my tone, in the tension I couldn't quite hide. June, she said carefully. Is everything okay? Just curious, I said, but my voice cracked slightly. Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. Dark hair. Younger. They seemed close. I nodded, my throat tight. How close? Close enough that I wondered if I should mention it to you. She squeezed my hand, but I didn't want to assume anything. I didn't want to cause problems if there was an innocent explanation. There isn't, I said quietly. Rachel's face fell. Oh, June. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I took a breath, pulling myself together. How many times did you see them? At least 3 or 4 times over the past few months. Always at that same coffee place. They looked comfortable together.
Familiar.
So, it wasn't just the cafe where I'd found them. They had regular places. Routines. This had been going on for a while. I thanked Rachel and promised to tell her more later, but I needed to process everything first. She understood and made me promise to call if I needed anything. When I got home that evening, David was already there. He'd cooked dinner, something he rarely did anymore. The kitchen smelled like garlic and herbs, and he'd set the table for 2. He was trying. I thought we could have a nice dinner, he said when I walked in. Just the 2 of us. Talk things through. I wanted to scream at him, to throw everything I'd learned in his face. But I didn't. That's nice, I said instead, setting down my bag. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. He served me pasta, poured wine, and tried to make conversation. I watched him perform. That's what it was. A performance. Every smile carefully calibrated. Every question designed to sound concerned without actually addressing what had happened. He didn't mention the cafe. Didn't mention her. Just talked about work, asked about my day, acted like everything was normal. And I realized something that made my skin crawl. He was good at this. Really good. This wasn't the first time he'd lied to me. It was just the first time I'd caught him. How many other times had he sat across from me like this, performing concern, performing love, while hiding things I didn't even know to look for? June, he said softly, reaching across the table for my hand. I know things have been difficult lately, but I want to fix this. I want us to get back to how we used to be. I looked at his hand covering mine, felt the weight of his wedding ring against my skin. How we used to be, I repeated. When was that exactly? He blinked, thrown by the question. Before things got complicated. Complicated, I said. Is that what we're calling it? I just mean, he stopped, recalibrating. I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. That hasn't changed. I pulled my hand away gently. What's her name?
What?
The woman in the cafe. What's her name? His jaw tightened. That's not important. It is to me. June, I don't think. Her name, David. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing his options. Finally, he said, Melissa. Melissa. Now she had a name. Now she was real in a way she hadn't been before. How long have you known her? June. How long? 9 months, he said quietly. 9 months. Almost a year. A year of lies. A year of him coming home to me while building something else with someone else. And you love her, I said. Not a question.
No.
I told you she doesn't. Don't lie to me anymore, David. Please. Just this once, don't lie. He looked down at his plate, his jaw working like he was chewing through words he didn't want to say. It's complicated, he said again. That phrase. That escape hatch he kept crawling through. I stood up from the table. I'm not hungry. June, please. Thank you for dinner, I said. But I think I need some space. I left him sitting there and went upstairs to our bedroom. Our bedroom. It didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a stage where we'd both been playing roles we'd forgotten were fake. That night, lying in bed alone, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him with everything I knew. Not yet. Because there was still one more piece I needed to understand. Melissa knew things about our finances. Things she shouldn't know unless David had told her. Which meant she wasn't just the other woman. She was part of whatever David was planning. And I needed to know what that plan was. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to reach out to her. 3 days of watching David come and go, of pretending everything was fine, of quietly gathering more evidence while he thought I was slowly forgiving him. I found Melissa's information through David's phone. He'd left it on the kitchen counter while he showered, and I knew his new passcode because I'd watched him type it in when he thought I wasn't looking. I sent her a simple text from my own phone. This is June, David's wife. I think we should talk. Woman to woman. I didn't expect her to respond. I thought she'd ignore it or block my number or tell David immediately. But she replied within an hour. When and where? We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a small park on the other side of town, far from anywhere either of us might run into David. I got there early and sat on a bench facing the entrance. The weather had cleared since the storm, but the air still felt heavy, like another one was brewing. When Melissa arrived, I recognized her immediately. She looked different in daylight, younger than I'd thought, maybe mid-20s. She wore jeans and an oversized jacket, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Without the cafe's dim lighting, she looked tired, uncertain. She sat down on the other end of the bench, keeping distance between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Thank you for coming, I said finally. She nodded, but didn't look at me. I wasn't sure if I should, but you did.
Yeah.
She pulled her jacket tighter. I figured you deserved answers. Or something. Do you have answers? I asked. She finally looked at me then, her eyes searching my face.
Some.
Maybe not the ones you want. Tell me what you know, I said. Please. Melissa took a breath. David told me your marriage was over. That you two were together in name only, living separate lives, just waiting for the right time to make it official. And you believed him. Yes. She said it simply, without defensiveness. He was convincing. He said you both knew it was over, but it was complicated because of finances and family, and I don't know. It sounded reasonable. People stay in dead marriages all the time. Our marriage isn't dead, I said quietly. I know that now. We sat in silence for a moment. A jogger passed by. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. How did you meet? I asked. At a conference. Some business thing downtown. He was charming. Funny. We started talking and it just happened. She paused. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. We started having lunch together. Coffee. It was casual at first. Then it became more. When did it become more? Around 6 months ago, she said. That's when he told me about you. About the marriage situation. 6 months. He'd waited 3 months to tell her I existed. 3 months of letting her believe he was available, free, hers. What else did he tell you? I asked. Melissa hesitated, picking at a loose thread on her jacket. He said you two had separate finances mostly. That you were planning to separate quietly. That he just needed to get some things in order first. My stomach dropped. What things? I don't know exactly. Legal stuff. Financial stuff. He made it sound like he was protecting you somehow. Making sure everything was fair before you went your separate ways. Protecting me, I repeated, my voice hollow. That's what he said. Melissa looked at me now, and I saw genuine confusion in her eyes. Was he lying about that too? He's been moving our money, I said. Our joint savings. Into an account only he can access. Her face went pale. What? Did he ever mention money to you? Our financial situation. He said you both had good jobs. That you were financially stable. That the separation wouldn't leave either of you struggling. She stopped, her expression shifting. But he also asked me about my finances a few times. Asked if I had savings. If I had debt. I thought he was just getting to know me, but what? But it felt oddly specific. Like he was taking inventory. A cold feeling settled in my chest. Did he ever ask you for money?
No.
Nothing like that.
She paused.
But he did suggest I put some money aside. Said it was smart to have an emergency fund that no one else knew about. I thought he was giving me financial advice. When did he suggest that? About 2 months ago. 2 months. Around the same time he'd scheduled that large transfer from our joint account. Melissa, I said carefully, did David ever introduce you to his friends? His family? Take you anywhere you might be seen together?
No.
She said it quickly. He said we needed to be discreet. That it would be messy if people found out before the separation was final. He kept everything very private. Did you ever go to his house? She shook her head. He said it would be disrespectful to you. That even though you were separating, You still lived there and deserved privacy. I almost laughed. The thoughtfulness of it. The careful boundaries he'd established to keep his two lives from colliding. He showed me pictures, though, Melissa continued, of the house. The neighborhood. Said once everything was settled, maybe we could find a place together. He showed you my house, I said flatly. Your house. Right. She looked down at her hands. God, I sound so stupid. You're not stupid, I said, and I meant it. You're not the one who lied. But I should have questioned him more. Should have wondered why he never wanted to be seen in public. Why everything was always so secretive. He gave you reasons. Good ones, probably. Yeah. Her voice cracked slightly.
He did.
We sat quietly for a moment. The sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the park. Can I ask you something? Melissa said. Go ahead. The night at the cafe. When you saw us. Did you know before that? Did you suspect? No, I admitted. I had no idea. So we both found out the same night that everything was a lie. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't expected. Not an adversary. Not someone trying to steal my husband. Just another person who'd been lied to. Who'd been used. Did you love him? I asked. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was barely a whisper. I thought I did. But now I don't know if what I loved was real. Or just another story, he told me. I know the feeling, I said. Melissa turned to face me fully now. June, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am. If I'd known, if I'd had any idea he was lying about your marriage, I never would have. I believe you, I said. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet, but I'm trying to understand everything first, before I make any decisions. She nodded slowly. The financial stuff you mentioned. The money he's been moving. You think he was planning something, don't you? Yes. What? I think he was planning to leave me, I said. But not until he'd secured as much money as possible. Made it look legitimate. Made it so I couldn't fight back. Melissa's expression darkened. That's why he kept telling me we needed to wait. Why the timing was never right. He was stalling, I said. With both of us. Playing us against each other without us even knowing we were in competition. We weren't in competition, I said firmly. We were both just trying to trust someone we shouldn't have. Melissa looked at me for a long moment, something like respect crossing her face. What do you need from me? The question surprised me. What? You reached out to me for a reason.
You wanted to know something.
So, what do you need? I thought about it.
About what David had done.
About the evidence I'd gathered. About the holes still remaining in my understanding. Did he ever mention anyone named Marcus? Her eyes widened.
Yes.
A few times. He said Marcus was his financial advisor. That Marcus was helping him restructure some investments. Did you ever meet Marcus?
No.
But David mentioned him recently. Said Marcus thought the timing was almost right. That things were coming together. The timing was almost right. Things were coming together. David wasn't just having an affair. He wasn't just moving money. He was executing a plan. And that plan involved Marcus, whoever he was. It involved finances I didn't fully understand yet. And somehow it involved Melissa too, even if she didn't know it. One more question, I said. When you're with David, does he use his phone much? Text people, make calls? Not really. He's actually pretty present when we're together. Why? Because when he's home with me, he's on his phone constantly. Says it's work. Understanding dawned on Melissa's face. He compartmentalizes. Completely. She stood up from the bench, wrapping her arms around herself. I haven't talked to him since the cafe. He's tried calling, texting, but I've been ignoring him.
Good, I said.
You think he'll try harder to reach me? Eventually. When he realizes he can't control the situation anymore. Melissa looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. Are you going to tell him we talked?
Not yet, I said.
Are you?
No.
She said it firmly. Whatever he was planning, whatever he's still planning, I don't want any part of it. We exchanged numbers before we left, an unspoken understanding passing between us. We weren't friends. We probably never would be. But we also weren't enemies. We were two people who'd been lied to by the same man. And now we both knew more than he'd wanted either of us to know. I waited one more week before confronting David. 1 week of watching him play the devoted husband, of enduring his attempts at romance, his careful apologies, his performances of regret. 1 week of documenting everything, printing out bank statements, copying emails, organizing dates and transactions into a timeline that told the story David didn't want told. I consulted with a lawyer quietly, under the guise of handling some estate planning for my parents. The lawyer listened carefully to everything I laid out, without naming names, without mentioning David directly, and gave me advice that confirmed what I'd suspected. What David had done wasn't just morally wrong. It was legally questionable, possibly fraudulent, depending on how things unfolded. The lawyer gave me steps to take, protections to put in place. I followed every instruction carefully. And then, on a Sunday evening when I knew David had nowhere to be, I laid everything out on the dining room table. He came home from a run, another new habit he'd picked up, probably spending time with Melissa, and found me sitting there, surrounded by documents. June. He stopped in the doorway, confusion crossing his face. What's all this? Sit down, David. Something in my tone made him freeze. Made him actually look at what was on the table. I watched the color drain from his face as he recognized what he was seeing. Where did you get?
Seat. Down.
He sat, his eyes darting across the papers, his mind clearly racing to construct a defense. I didn't give him time to build one. Bank statements, I said, pointing to the first stack. Showing transfers from our joint savings into an account only you can access. 8 months of steady withdrawals. Small amounts at first, then larger. All leading up to a scheduled transfer on December 15th, my birthday, that would have cleaned out most of what remained. June, I can explain. Emails, I continued, pointing to the next stack. Between you and Marcus Chen, your so-called financial advisor. Discussing asset protection strategies and timing windows and making sure everything's transferred before she notices. She being me. David's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Calendar entries, I went on. Your meetings that don't align with actual work. Lunch appointments with Melissa that you logged as client meetings. Hotel charges for nights you said you were working late at the office. You've been going through my things, he said, his voice rising. You've been spying on me. You've been stealing from me. I cut him off. From us. From our shared life. I haven't stolen anything. Then explain these transfers. Explain why you moved our money without discussing it with me. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was stressed. But this time it didn't evoke sympathy. Just cold observation. I was protecting us, he said finally. Protecting our assets. From what? From market volatility. From. David. Stop lying. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. The mask of concern, of remorse, cracked slightly. You talked to her, he said. You talked to Melissa. I did. What did she tell you? That you told her our marriage was over. That we were separating. That you just needed time to get things in order. It wasn't. That you showed her pictures of her house. That you talked about a future together. That you asked about her finances. His jaw clenched. She had no right. She had every right, I said. Just like I have every right to know what my husband has been planning. I haven't been planning anything, he insisted. You're making this into something it's not. I pulled out another document. The one I'd been saving. Legal papers, I said. Filed 3 months ago. A trust restructuring that would give you sole control of certain assets in the event of a divorce. Assets that were supposed to be jointly owned. His face went completely white. I signed these. I continued. You told me they were for estate planning. For tax purposes. You rushed me through them, said we needed to file before the end of the quarter. Those were legitimate. They were designed to protect you. Not us.
You.
To make sure that when you left, when you filed for divorce, you'd walk away with more than you should. David stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You're twisting everything, making me look like some kind of criminal. Were you planning to file for divorce? I asked calmly.
What?
Simple question. Were you planning to leave me? He stared at me, his chest heaving, and for the first time since I'd known him, he had no answer ready. When were you going to do it? I pressed. After the big transfer went through? After you'd secured everything you could? Or were you going to wait until Melissa got tired of waiting and forced her hand? You don't understand. Then make me understand, David. Please. I'm begging you. Give me one honest answer. He turned away from me, gripping the back of the chair. When he spoke, his voice was different. Harder. Colder. You weren't supposed to find out like this. The words hung in the air between us. So it's true, I said. All of it. I was trying to do this the right way, he said, still not looking at me. I was trying to make sure we both walked away okay. That neither of us got hurt. By lying to me? By stealing our money? By building a whole separate life behind my back. I wasn't stealing. What would you call it? He spun around then, and for the first time, I saw real anger in his face. Not panic. Not remorse. Anger. I built our life, he said. I worked 60-hour weeks. I brought in the bigger salary. I made the investments that grew our savings. So yes, I moved some money around. I protected what I earned. We earned. I corrected. We built.
We saved.
Together. You don't get it, he said. You never got it. I've been carrying this marriage for years. Carrying you. The words hit like a physical blow. Carrying me, I repeated. I didn't mean.
No, say it.
Say what you really think. He looked at me, and something ugly passed across his face.
Fine.
Do you want honesty? I've been unhappy for a long time. I stayed because it was easier than leaving. Because I didn't want to be the bad guy. But then I met Melissa, and she made me remember what it felt like to actually want to be with someone. So you decided to leave, I said. But not until you'd taken everything you could. I wasn't taking everything. I was taking what I deserved. By lying to both of us. By manipulating our finances. By filing legal documents under false pretenses. It's called protecting my interests, he shot back. People do it every day. People don't betray their partners every day. Don't they? He laughed, a harsh sound. June, wake up. Half the couples we know are miserable. They just hide it better than most. So that makes it okay? It makes it realistic. I stood up then, gathering the papers in front of me. You're right about one thing. I was naive. I trusted you completely. I never questioned anything, because I thought we were partners. We were. We weren't. A partnership requires honesty.
Trust.
You've been planning an exit strategy for months while pretending everything was fine. I was trying to minimize damage. You were trying to minimize consequences, I said. For yourself. I walked toward him, and he actually took a step back. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. I've already frozen our joint accounts. I've filed legal paperwork protecting my share of our assets. I've documented everything you've done. Every transfer, every lie. His eyes widened. You can't. I already have. I spoke with a lawyer. Multiple lawyers, actually. They were very interested in the papers you had me sign. In the transfers you made, without disclosure. In the patterns that suggest financial fraud. It wasn't fraud. Let's let a court decide that. His face flushed red. You're threatening me? I'm protecting myself. Finally. This is ridiculous. June, you're overreacting. We can still fix this. We can work this out. No, I said simply. We can't. What about Melissa? He demanded. You think she's innocent in all this? She knew I was married. She was told our marriage was over. She was lied to just like I was. So you're defending her now?
I'm stating facts.
You're the one who lied. To both of us. David's expression twisted into something I'd never seen before.
Pure defensive rage.
You think you're so perfect, he said. So blameless? You're cold.
June.
You've been cold for years.
Distant.
I was lonely in my own marriage.
Then you should have talked to me.
We could have gone to counseling. We could have tried to fix things. I didn't want to fix things, he said. I wanted out. The words settled between us, final and irreversible.
Then you're out, I said.
Pack your things. I want you gone by tonight. This is my house too. Actually, it's in my name. Another thing you didn't know because you were so busy planning your exit that you forgot to check some basic facts. That stopped him cold. What? My parents helped with the down payment. The house is titled in my name. You're living in my house, David. I watched him process this, watched the calculations running behind his eyes as he realized his careful plan had holes he hadn't accounted for. You can't just kick me out. I can. I have. The locks will be changed tomorrow. June. I held up a hand. One sentence, David. You get one more sentence. Choose it carefully. He stared at me, breathing hard, and I saw him cycle through options. Anger.
Pleading.
Justification. But something in my expression must have told him it was over. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat.
Defeated.
You'll regret this. No, I said. I really won't. I walked past him, leaving him standing alone with all the evidence of his betrayal spread across our dining room table. Within an hour, I heard him moving around upstairs, packing. When he finally left, suitcase in hand, he paused at the door. I'll call you, he said, when you've calmed down, when you can think clearly. I didn't respond, just watched him walk out, get in his car, and drive away. The house felt empty after he left.
But not in a bad way.
In a clean way, like something toxic had been removed, and now I could finally breathe. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting in the same cafe, where everything had changed. The storm had long since passed, leaving behind clear skies and crisp winter air. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and golden, transforming the space into something completely different from the shadowy refuge I'd stumbled into that rainy night. I ordered the same tea I'd ordered before. Found a table near the window instead of the corner booth where I'd found David and Melissa. That booth was occupied by a young couple now, laughing over their phones, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded in that same spot weeks earlier. Life moved on. Spaces held memories, but didn't stay frozen in them. I pulled out my laptop and opened the document I'd been working on, financial planning spreadsheets, apartment listings, a budget that was tighter than what I was used to, but entirely mine. The divorce was proceeding. David had hired a lawyer who'd tried every angle to dispute my claims, but the evidence was overwhelming. The transfers, the hidden account, the legal documents filed under false pretenses, it all painted a clear picture. David had been furious at first, making threats, sending long emails explaining how I'd misunderstood everything. But as the legal process ground forward and his lawyer spelled out exactly how much trouble he was in, the tone of his messages changed. The last one I'd received, just yesterday, was almost pitiable. June, can we please talk? I made mistakes, but I never wanted to hurt you. I still care about you. Can't we find a way to work this out? I deleted it without responding. The cafe door opened, and I looked up instinctively. A woman walked in, dark hair, oversized jacket, and for a second my heart jumped. But it wasn't Melissa, just someone who reminded me of her. I hadn't heard from Melissa since our conversation in the park. I'd thought about reaching out, checking in, but decided against it. We'd given each other what we needed: truth, clarity, validation that we weren't crazy for feeling betrayed. Anything more felt unnecessary. I hoped she was doing okay. Hoped she'd learned the same lessons I had about trust and self-protection and not letting anyone else write your story for you. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Coffee this week? Want to hear how you're doing? I smiled and typed back. Yes. This time I'll tell you everything. Over the past 3 weeks, I'd been learning things about myself I'd forgotten. I was stronger than I'd thought. More capable. I'd spent so many years deferring to David, letting him handle finances and major decisions, that I'd convinced myself I needed him for those things. But I didn't. I'd frozen accounts, filed legal paperwork, consulted lawyers, and restructured my entire financial life without his input. And I'd done it well. The house was mine now, truly mine, though I was considering selling it. Too many memories. Too many rooms that echoed with conversations that turned out to be lies. I'd been looking at apartments downtown. Smaller spaces. Places where I could start fresh. Build something new that was just mine. My parents had been supportive in their own careful way. They'd never particularly liked David, I'd realized. They'd just been too polite to say anything. "We trust your judgment," they'd always said when I'd asked their opinion of him. Now my mom said things like, "You deserve someone who doesn't make you question your own reality." And my dad, blunt as always, had simply said, "Good riddance." Work had been a refuge. My colleagues knew something had happened. I'd been distracted, taking phone calls from lawyers, leaving early for meetings that had nothing to do with our projects. But they'd been kind about it, covering for me the way I'd covered for Sharon that night. The night that had changed everything. If I hadn't stayed late for Sharon, if the storm hadn't hit, if I hadn't pulled into that cafe parking lot, I would still be living the lie. Still trusting David. Still signing documents I didn't read and believing stories that didn't add up. Part of me wished I'd never found out. That I could have kept living in ignorant comfort, never knowing what was happening behind my back. But that part was getting smaller every day. The truth had hurt. God, it had hurt, but the alternative would have been worse. David's careful plan would have eventually come to fruition. He would have left when the timing was right for him, having secured as much money as possible, leaving me blindsided and powerless. At least now I had agency, knowledge, control over my own life. The barista called out someone's order, and I glanced up. The same woman who'd been working that stormy night. She caught my eye and smiled, a small gesture of recognition. I wondered if she remembered me. The woman who'd come in from the rain and discovered her life falling apart. Probably not. She saw dozens of people every day. I was just another customer to her. But to me, this cafe had become something else entirely. Not a place of betrayal, but a place of awakening. The moment when I stopped sleepwalking through my own life. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from my lawyer. Documents signed by David. Preliminary settlement moving forward. Call when you can. I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief, maybe. Or just exhaustion finally giving way. It was almost over. The legal part, anyway. The emotional part would take longer. I knew that. I'd already started seeing a therapist, someone who specialized in betrayal and rebuilding trust in yourself, not just in others. "You're not broken," she told me in our first session. "You're hurt. There's a difference." I was learning to believe that. A notification popped up on my laptop, an email from a company I'd applied 2 weeks ago. I'd been quietly job hunting, not because I needed to leave my current position, but because I wanted to. Wanted to do something different. Something that felt like forward motion. I opened the email. "We'd like to schedule an interview." I smiled. Actually smiled, a real one that reached my eyes and felt genuine. Progress. Small but real. I spent another hour in the cafe, working on my laptop, sipping tea that had gone lukewarm, watching people come and go. A mother with a toddler. An elderly couple sharing a pastry. A group of college students studying for exams. All of them living their own complicated lives. All of them carrying their own stories. I wondered how many of them had ever had a moment like mine. A moment when everything they thought they knew shattered and reassembled into something completely different. Probably more than I realized. When I finally packed up to leave, I took one last look around the cafe. The corner booth where I'd found David and Melissa was empty now. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, turning the space warm and golden. It was just a cafe. Just a place where people came for coffee and comfort and refuge from the storm. But it was also the place where my life had split into before and after. I walked out into the crisp winter afternoon. The air was cold but clean, the sky clear and endless. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking toward my car. My phone buzzed one more time. I pulled it out, expecting another text from Rachel or my lawyer. but it was from David. Please, June. Can we just talk? I'm not the monster you think I am. I read it twice. Felt the familiar pull of guilt, the instinct to explain, to smooth things over, to make him feel better about himself. Then I did something I'd never done before. I blocked his number.
Just like that.
Simple. Final. I didn't owe him closure. Didn't owe him the chance to rewrite history or convince me that his version of events was somehow less damaging than what I'd lived through. I owed him nothing. And I owed myself everything. As I drove home, to my house, my space, my sanctuary, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 weeks ago. The one who'd walked into that cafe exhausted and unsuspecting. The one who'd still believed her husband when he said he'd just called to check in. That woman felt like a stranger now. I'd become someone else. Someone who asked questions. Who trusted her instincts. Who didn't apologize for protecting herself. Someone who'd been hurt but refused to stay broken. The divorce would finalize in a few months. The financial settlement would be complicated but fair. David would move on with his life, probably spinning some version of events that made him the victim. Let him. I didn't need to control his narrative anymore. I just needed to live my own. When I got home, I walked through the empty house. Empty because David was gone, but also empty because I'd started packing things away. Old photographs. Wedding gifts we'd received. Furniture we'd picked out together. I was keeping what felt right, and letting go of what didn't. The house would go on the market in the spring. By summer, I'd be somewhere new. Somewhere that didn't echo with his voice or hold memories I was still learning to categorize. I made dinner for one, something simple, something I actually liked instead of the complicated meals David had always preferred. I ate at the counter instead of the dining table. Watched a show he'd hated. Went to bed early because I was tired, not because I was avoiding anything. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I slept through the night. No nightmares about betrayal. No anxiety about what came next. Just deep, dreamless sleep. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the curtains. A new day. A clean slate. I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop to check the apartment listings again. There was one I'd saved, a small place with big windows, hardwood floors, and a balcony that overlooked the city. It was more than I'd planned to spend, but something about it felt right. I scheduled a viewing for that afternoon. Then I called Rachel back and made plans for coffee later that week. Called my mom and told her I was doing okay, actually okay, not just saying it. By the time I left for the apartment viewing, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time.
Hope.
Not the naive hope that everything would be perfect. Not the desperate hope that David would somehow undo what he'd done. Just the quiet, steady hope that I could build something new. Something honest. Something mine. The apartment was even better in person. Light-filled and open, with a view of the city that made me catch my breath. I'll take it, I told the landlord. She smiled. Don't you want to think about it? No, I said. I've done enough thinking. This is right. I signed the lease that day. Gave notice that I'd be selling my house. Started making lists of what to move, what to donate, what to leave behind. A week later, I went back to the cafe one last time. Not because I needed to. Not because I was looking for closure or meaning or some dramatic final moment. Just because I wanted a good cup of tea. I ordered, found my usual table by the window, and sat down with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. The cafe was busy but comfortable. The same soft jazz played overhead. The same warm, coffee-scented air wrapped around me. And sitting there, reading and sipping my tea, I realized something important. This place wasn't special because of what had happened here. It wasn't sacred or cursed or marked by fate. It was just a cafe. And I was just a person who'd walked in from a storm and discovered that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is also the thing that saves you. I finished my tea, closed my book, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. The storm had passed, and I was still standing, stronger than before, ready for whatever came next. If someone you trusted completely was hiding something this big, would you want to know, even if the truth destroyed everything you thought you had? Like this video and subscribe for more stories about the difficult choices that change our lives forever.